Tell me, do you love stories? I absolutely love stories. And since you're here with me as well, I think you love stories as well. Well, different languages have different ways of calling people to come and enjoy a story. The English people will say, story, story. In Kiswahili, we say, hadithi, hadithi. If you go to the Somali community, you will hear them say, sheko, sheko. But have you ever wondered, where did stories come from? Well, come with me and I will tell you a story about the origin of stories. And because this particular stories comes from the Zulu community, you have to come with me all the way to South Africa. Kwasuga suga sugela bo, kotukalo kungatsomi. Kwasuga suga sugela mamai, kotukalo kungatsomi. Kwasuga suga sugela bo, kotukalo kungatsomi. Kwasuga suga sugela mamai, kotukalo kungatsomi. So they say that a long, long time ago, when the first man and the first woman and the first people were still living in this world, there lived a woman whose name was Manzandaba. And Manzandaba lived with her husband Zenzele, and they had many children. Now, Manzandaba and her family were very busy because they had a lot of work to do. They would go out in the fields, and they would dig, and they would plant, and they would weed, and they would harvest. The children would take out the animals to graze. And sometimes the family would go down by the river and watch as the water flowed. And the children would take stones and throw them into the water and giggle as they saw the water jump up. Yes, they would have fun. And Manzandamba, Zenzele, and their children were happy. Well, most of the time. For you see, that time of the evening, when the sun has already gone down and darkness has come up, that time of rest, that time when it is too dark to do any work, and yet it is too early to go to sleep, the children would complain. It's so boring sitting here doing nothing. And Manzandaba would tell them, why don't you play? Oh, it's too dark to play. And Zenzele, who had the hands and the heart of an artist, would agree. True, it is too late for me to do any carving. For you see, Zenzele loved to carve, and any piece of wood in his hands would turn into a masterpiece. Sometimes a beautiful stool, sometimes a cup or another utensils, and sometimes a picture that showed their lives. Yes, people going, doing their work, birds flying, animals in their natural habitat. And Manzandaba had to agree that yes, they needed to find something to do at that particular time. And she went out and asked her neighbors, and she realized that they were facing the same problem. And when this had happened for many days, Zenzele and Manzandaba agreed that something had to be done. Yes, they had to get an activity, an interesting activity to do. And Zenzele agreed and promised that he would do whatever it took. He would clean, he would wash, he would feed the children, he would take care of the animals, if Manzandaba would take the journey to go and look for a solution. So very early one morning, Manzandaba woke up and she made breakfast for her family, and they enjoyed it together. And when they were done, she took a basket and put some food and some water, and she hugged her children goodbye and set off in search of an answer. Kwasuga suga suga labo, kwatikalo kungatsomi. Kwasuga suga suga labo, kwatikalo kungatsomi. Kwasuga suga suga labo, kwatikalo kungatsomi. Kwasuga suga suga la mama we, kwatikalo kungatsomi. And as he walked, he decided that she was going to ask any animal that she met. Maybe they would have an answer. And the first animal she met was Fene. Yes, Fene the baboon. And the baboon was with her children, and she was busy grooming them and looking at them. Manzandaba was reminded of herself, and she called out to Fene and said, "Fene, how are you this day? Let me ask you, that time of the evening when the sun has already gone down and darkness has come up, that time of rest when it is too late to do any work and yet it is too early to go to sleep, tell me, what do you and your family do?" And Fanny the baboon laughed. Time of rest, did you say? Look at me and my children. I have a lot of work during the day, cleaning and feeding and making sure they are safe. Come evening, I am so exhausted. When the sun goes to sleep, so do I. And Manzandaba nodded, for she herself knew the exhaustion that comes with taking care of a family, and she had been in the similar situation many days. But that was not what she was looking for. And said goodbye to the baboon, she continued on her journey. Kwasuga suga suga labo, kwatukalo kungatsomi. Kwasuga suga suga la mama, kwatukalo kungatsomi. Kwasuga suga suga labo, kwatukalo kungatsomi. Kwasuga suga suga la mama, kwatukalo kungatsomi. And she walked into the forest, and now there were more trees, and it was getting a bit dark. And then she heard it. She wondered where the sound was coming from, and she followed it. And when she came to where she thought it was coming from, everything went silent. And she looked around, and in a small hole near one of the trees, she saw it. Yes, it was a cricket. And she said, "Cricket, I'm sorry for disturbing you, but I have a question for you. Please tell me, that time when the sun has gone down and the darkness has come up, that time of rest when it is too late to do any work and yet too early to go to sleep, what do you and your family do?" And the cricket looked at Manzandaba and said, "We sing. That is what we do." And the cricket and her family began making their music. Sing. Manzandaba liked the sound of that, but it did not sound like what she was looking for. And thanking the cricket, she continued on her way. Kwasuga suga suga labo, kwasuga suga suga la mama, kwatukalo kungatsomi. Kwasuga suga suga labo, kwatukalo kungatsomi. Kwasuga suga suga la mama, kwatukalo kungatsomi. The trees became closer and closer, and it was quite dark inside. And then she saw it. lights like sparks of fire floating among the trees. And she went closer, and she realized that it was not fire, but it was a group of fireflies. And she called the fireflies, asking them the same question. And the fireflies said, well, this is exactly what we do. We dance. And the fireflies gave her a hell of a choreographed dance with their lights shining and shining and flashing and flashing and flashing. And it was indeed beautiful to watch. But Manzandaba said, thank you so much, fireflies. The dance is actually quite good, but I don't think it is what I'm looking for. And the fireflies asked, well, if you don't know what you're looking for, how will you know when you find it? And Manzandaba smiled and said, when I find it, then I will know. And she went out of the forest, and she was soon into a clearing full of grass, and the sun blinded her eyes that she stumbled into a family of some other animals. Yes, animals with long, long ears and yeah, it was the family of Nogwaja, the hare. And Nogwaja, the hare, and the family hopped away. But Manzandaba called out, saying, Nogwaja, I come in peace. Please tell me, I have a question for you. That time of the evening when the sun has already gone down and darkness has come and it is time to rest, what do you do with your family? And Nogwaja's eyes became big, and she flopped an ear and then another, and he sniffed and then said, well, we tell stories. Stories? Tell stories? That sounded quite interesting. That sounded like what Manzandaba was looking for. And she told Nogwaja, Nogwaja, my family and I would enjoy some stories. Can you please give me some stories? Nogwaja hesitated. You see, Nogwaja the hare was quite a trickster. He had heard about stories, but he had never met stories, and he did not have any himself. But he was not going to say that he did not have any. So he became annoyed, well, pretended to be annoyed and said, stories? You want me to tell you stories at this time of the day? Oh. And away he hopped. Stories! Stories, yes! Oh, Manzandaba knew. Even without knowing exactly what stories were, she knew that is exactly what she was looking for. And when she bumped into Ndlovu, the elephant, she asked a different question this time. Ndlovu, the elephant, who walks for miles and miles, tell me, would you know where I can find some stories? And Ndlovu, the elephant, said, I have never heard about stories, but I know someone who might know, and you know him too. The eagle. Well, he flies all over, and he flies higher than all the birds. Maybe he knows where you can find some stories. And Manzandaba set off to go and look for Mkwazi, the eagle. And the eagle, was up high up above the ocean, and his talons were out, and he was scouting for a fish. And when he saw a fish, he swooped down and Mkwazi, 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 called out Manzandaba. This frightened Mkwazi, and he dropped the fish that he had been about to catch. And he came to the show and looked at Manzandaba and said, "Woman, what is it that is so important that you shout my name and made me lose my meal?" "Oh, Mkwazi, the great and wisest of all birds and all animals, I am sorry that I cost you your meal, but I need your help. I am looking for stories. My family are hungry for stories, and I thought that in your wisdom you would know where I could find some." Mkwazi the eagle looked at the woman's face and saw the determination in her eyes. And he cooled down a bit and he said, "Yes, indeed, I am quite wise, but I have to admit, I don't know everything. I don't know where you can find stories, but I know someone who can. I have a friend who knows the secrets of the deep, deep ocean. Maybe he can help you. Stay here and wait for me." And Mkwazi the eagle flew away. And Manzandaba sat on the shore, and she took her basket, took some food and some water, and ate as she waited for the eagle's return. And she waited for 4 nights and 3 days. And on the 3rd day, in the evening, she saw a small speck high in the air. And as it came closer and closer and closer, she realized it was Mkwazi the eagle, who came and perched next to her and said, "Woman, I have returned, and my friend has agreed to take you where you can find some stories." And from the water, a great sea turtle appeared, saying, "Woman, climb on my back, hold tight onto my shell, and we will be on our way." And with a quick thank you to Mkwazi the eagle, Manzandaba held onto the turtle's shell, and they were soon in a journey into the water. And Manzandaba was shocked to see a different world under the water with beautiful animals and plants. And when they finally got to their destination, people. Yes, she was in the land of the spirit people. And the people down there were as curious about her as she was about them. "What do you want from us, woman from the dry lands?" they asked. And Manzandaba explained to them about her journey and her quest for stories. "Do you have some stories that I can take to my people? They would definitely enjoy listening to stories," she said. And the people in the spirit kingdom said, "Yes, we do have stories, and we can definitely give you our stories. But what will you give us in return?" "What do you want?" "Anything that you desire. If it is within my power to give, then I will give to you," Manzandaba said. And the people whispered as they consulted among themselves. And finally they said, "Manzandaba, we cannot come to the dry land to see how you are, how your people are, how your home is. But it would definitely be nice to know how your people live. Can you get us a picture, Manzandaba? A picture of your home and your people?" And Manzandaba said, "A picture? That I can get to you." And I ride on the turtle, and she was off to the show. And she and the turtle agreed to meet on the first night of the new moon. And she went home. And when she got there, She told her husband and her children about her journey and her different experiences. And when she came to the end about the picture, Zenzele said, "Oh, yes, that I can definitely do." And without wasting any time, he went to work. Now, the people in the village also came to hear about Manzandaba's journey. And they were quite intrigued. And they came and they saw as Zenzele worked on a block of wood. And from it came a picture of their home. Different animals that they kept. And animals that they found in the world. Oh, and people going on to their different activities of the day. And come the new moon, Zenzele was ready. And that morning, Zenzele and the children accompanied Manzandaba to the shore of the ocean. And when the great sea turtle came, Manzandaba tied the picture carefully on her back, climbed on the sea turtle, and they were soon into the land of the spirit people. "Here you go," she said. And the spirit people were impressed with the picture, for they were seeing a completely different world. And they gave Manzandaba a necklace made of fine, fine shells to take to her husband as an appreciation for the work of art that he had created for them. And then they turned to Manzandaba and said, "For you and your people, the gift of story." And they gave Manzandaba the most beautiful shell she had ever seen, saying, "With this shell, anytime you want a story, put the shell to your ear, and you will have a story." And Manzandaba thanked them, and off she went back to the shore to find waiting not just her family, but people from her village as well. And when they got home that evening, when the sun had gone down and darkness had come up, that time of rest, when it was too late to do any work and yet too early to go to sleep, they made a big fire, and everybody in the village came and sat around. And they called to Manzandaba, "A story, Manzandaba! Tell us a story!" Manzandaba sat down on a stool, took the shell, put it to her ear, and called out, "Kwasugasugela!" And that is how the first story came to be. And because of her interaction with the cricket and with the fireflies, sometimes when she was telling a story, she would put in a song and some music, and the people would sing to it. And sometimes she would even put some dance and movement. And as it was then, so it is until now. Kwasuga suga suga la bo, kwatukalo kungatsomi. Kwasuga suga suga la mamai, kwatukalo kungatsomi. Kwasuga suga la bo, kwatukalo kungatsomi. Kwasuga suga la mamai, kwatukalo kungatso.